All right, ladies, it's time to discuss the Kings, Sharks, Canucks, and Golden Knights for the upcoming 2018 season. So I am No Sleeves 12, and these are my hot takes for the next NHL season. All right, guys, first up is the poo-ass Los Angeles Kings. I'm just kidding. I'm a little biased, obviously, because I'm a Sharks fan, and I'm still hurt about being up 3-0 and losing the series. So to go over last year, they finished 5th in the division, 8 points out of the playoffs, which was fantastic, and 22nd in the league overall. So let's discuss fancy stats and whatnot. Now, they got rid of Daryl Sutter and their GM Lombardi to go into, bring into a new regime to move on from the cup runs and whatnot, which I think is good for the franchise. But that being said, Daryl Sutter was very good at coaching defensive hockey, and they finished first in the league in Corsi 4. But the problem was it doesn't matter how many shot attempts that you actually can generate. Scoring having the 27th ranked offense is it doesn't really matter how many shot attempts you're generating if you just can't bury the puck. So that is a big factor as to why they finished 8 points out of the playoffs. They were 5th in goals against. Budaj came in, had an amazing year when Quick went down, and obviously if you're controlling the play better than any other team in the NHL, you're going to be very good at suppressing shot attempts against, and that's why they did so well in that category. For power play, they were 15th in the NHL, which is dead average. And then the penalty kill was 5th. Again, Daryl Sutter is very good at defensive hockey and whatnot, so 5th in the NHL in penalty kill is very good. Now let's discuss acquisition. So the new GM, Rob Blake, signed a few players to one-year deals. Darcy Kemper, Nick Shore, Christian Folin, all guys that aren't really expected to play a big role, and they're on prove-it contracts, all under $1 million. Very, very good contract. Underrated signing was Camilleri at $1 million for 1 year. Again, it's kind of a prove-it deal, but you're getting a decent score for your top six. And only 1 year. There's really no disadvantage to it. They did lose a few, but not in a bad way, to be honest. They lost to Ginla, my favorite NHLer of my lifetime. Scuderi, who's just over the hill. Terrible defenseman the last few years. Devin Setaguchi, it was a nice story, but didn't really pan out. They haven't signed Purcell, and I doubt they will. And they obviously lost Braden McNabb to Vegas, which does hurt, but they have a half-decent defensive core, so it won't be that big of a loss. Now let's talk draft. So this year they drafted 11th overall in the first round and landed Gabe Vilardi, which was a consensus top 6 pick. I'm not really sure as to why he fell so far. And a lot of NHL experts aren't either, so that was a fantastic pick, which sucks because I'm a Sharks fan. Anderson Dolan in the second round, again, very good from my understanding as far as talent. Was kind of scouted in the end of the first round, so to get him at 41st was very good. Next year they have all their picks as well as in 2019, so they're all set there. So let's talk cap now. Right now, without any other signings, they're at $68,418,000, leaving them with $6.5 million in cap room. Next year, they're going to lose Camilleri, obviously, because he only signed that 1-year deal. Nolan, Dowd, and Folin, nothing big, nothing's huge coming off the books, and they have 2 RFAs in Shore and Forbert. I expect Forbert to get quite a bit of a raise because he did have kind of an emergence last year, especially replacing, and now that he's got to replace McNabb with Doughty. But yeah, nothing huge, so they're all right as far as cap goes currently. Now, there are a few cap problems that Rob Blake's going to need to address is first the slug Dustin Brown making $5.5 million for 5 more years. Albatross of a contract that needs to be moved to a team that can bury it for compensating picks and whatnot in return. Gaborik as well, $4.8 million. He has fallen off a cliff in his his later years, and he's making way too much for the next 4 years. Now they do have Toffoli and Pearson making pretty friendly contracts for the next 3 and 4 years, so that does kind of mitigate that. But moving Brown and Gaborik is going to be a big plus if they can get that done this year. Let's talk lineup real quick. First line is going to be Pearson, Carter, Toffoli, followed up by Gaborik, Kopitar, Camilleri, Trevor Lewis, Shore, and Kemp on the third line, and then Clifford, Dowd, and Brown on the fourth. On D, you've got Forbert, Doughty, Muzzin, Martinez, and Gravel and Folan. Very good decor. And then you have Quick and Darcy Kemper. Now, last year, Carter did very well, another 30-goal campaign, 66 points, but Kopitar, after signing that giant $10 million deal, one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL, but only had 52 points. That needs to change. Pearson with 24 goals and 20 points for 44 total points, and then Doughty right behind him with another 44. Kind of a down year for Doughty, but kind of a down year for the Kings in general. Alec Martinez posting 39 points is a very good sign. Again, losing McNabb, having Martinez step up is also very good. I get Brown with 36 points, $5.5 million. That's just got to be moved. Now, very quickly, my hot takes for the Kings. Kopitar will touch 70 points. Toffoli will hit 30 goals. Quick will post an under 910 save percentage as he kind of falls off in the next few years. Kings, I think, will finish 5th and miss the playoffs. Okay, guys, moving on to the Vancouver Canucks. So last season they finished 7th in the Pacific Division, 69 points, well out of the playoffs, and 29th in the league, and got robbed by the new NHL lottery system that is complete bunk. Corsi 4 percentage, 27th in the league, power play 29th, penalty kill 28th, goals for 29th, goals against 24. Again, so they just had a terrible year, and it is coinciding with the scenes getting older as well as management just making horrible decisions as far as free agents and trades goes recently, and we're going to discuss on that in a little bit. Now, to kind of hammer home my point about the horrible free agent signings and trades and whatnot that they've made, signing Del Zotto for 2 years at $3 million, just a waste. Del Zotto is no longer a very, very viable NHL defenseman, and signing another veteran player and not letting your rookies play and kind of opening up roster spots. Again, in the new NHL, there's really no point to it. Gagne at 3 years, $3 million each. He had a great season with the Columbus Blue Jackets and, absolutely hammering on the power play. But I guess it's kind of a safe deal. $3 million is not really going to hurt the Canucks. But my question is why sign of aging veteran when you should not be trying to actively improve your team for this season specifically. They need to be looking for the future. They brought in Burmistrov and Weirkoch and Anders Nielsen on prove-it deals. They lost Ryan Miller to Anaheim, which is fine. You need to see what you have in Markstrom finally. They lost Triumkin to Russia, which does kind of hurt because he was emerging as one of their better defensemen. And then they lost Spiza to Vegas. So, due to them being a complete disaster last year, they did draft 5th overall and got Elias Peterson. Looks like he has some offensive skill, but an extremely small frame. It was alarming to see a picture of him in the development camp earlier this week. That dude needs to put on some weight. Drafting Cole Lind in the second, another really high valued prospect in the second round was a good pick. And then they had the Memorial Cup winning goaltender DiPietro, 64th overall. What they do need to worry about next year is a few of their high draft picks from the previous years need to step up now. With Sedin's getting older and the roster kind of transitioning to the younger players, Virtanen needs to do something. 65 games last year, put up 14 points. You can't waste a high first-round pick on him and him be a bust, especially when they're rebuilding. Brock Bouger needs to, show that he is, that highly touted prospect. And then Thatcher Demko, he was an insane goaltender, the minors, and then AHL he's kind of struggled a little bit, but later on in the last season, he does look like he's come around, so that does need to improve, and they should be in good shape. As far as their cap goes, $65.5 million committed. They have $9.5 million free, but they need to re-sign Bo Horvat, and that's going to be pricey, so a lot of that cap space is going to be eaten up by that. Next year, both the Sedins are free agents, as well as Goodbranson, and then there are Fazar, Barchi, and Marcus Granlund, so they do have some things they need to re-sign. The Sedins is going to be an interesting thing to watch going into all the way through next year. So let's look at the lineup going into next year. It'll be Daniel Sedin, Henrik Sedin, Louis Eriksson, followed by Berchi, Horvat, and Brock Bouger, Boucher, Sutter, and Gagne as a third line, and then Michael Chaput, Marcus Granlund, and Dorsett. Currently on defense, they've got Edler and Tanev, and Del Zotto, Goodbranson, and then Hutton and Stetcher, and then Markstrom and Nielsen in net. that goalie combo does look like it could be brutal, but Markstrom could end up being a quite decent goaltender given the shot that now Ryan Miller is out of the way. Just to give a little follow-up on how they did offensively last year, it wasn't very impressive. Horvat finished with 20 goals, 32 assists for 52 points, followed by Henrik with 50 points, Daniel Sedin with 44. They've clearly fallen off in their later years, which is to be expected. Sven Berchi had a half-decent campaign, considering he was once a very highly rated prospect, put in 35 points, and then Sutter with 34. There's not a lot of high-end stuff left here, but Bo Horvat and Brock Bozier do look like they can emerge, as well as Jewel Levy, the defenseman they drafted last year, who does look like the real deal, and he should get a shot to break camp this year. So let's talk my hot takes for the Vancouver Canucks. I think they finished 7th in the Pacific Division. I think the Sedins are traded at the trade line together to someone. Now, that is a big cap hit, so I'm assuming that the cap would have to be retained, but I think that they will trade them both and get a half-decent haul to a playoff team. I think Bo Horvat will touch 60 points, and I think Virtanen will kind of cement his bust status next year. Now let's touch on the Vegas Knights. Obviously, I don't have any gameplay as playing with that franchise, so here's an ass whooping I put on at Versus months ago. So let's just talk who they got and what their lineup looks like to start off. So first line is going to be Marchessault, Shipachyov, and James Neal, followed by Perron, Eakin, Riley Smith, Eric Holla, Carlson, and Lindberg, and then Carrier, Bellemare, and Pulkkinen. On defense, looks a little bit brighter. McNabb and Theodore's a half decent, first. It's a bottom pairing first pair, but it is a half decent pairing, followed by Nate Schmidt, Miller, and then Lucas Spiza and Jason Garrison. And then in net, they've got Fleury and Picard. So with Fleury and nets, he's going to kind of do what Anderson did for the Leafs last year. I think make them a little bit better just because he's going to save them some games. But their lineup as a whole, intelligently, I think, is bad on purpose, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. So just to highlight the roster a little bit, Marchessault finished with 30 goals last year. Neal finished with 23, and Perron had 46 points. Outside of that, we're looking at third and fourth liners really to round out the roster. So I think it is going to be quite a struggle early on. But again, I think that is by design. I'm going to explain why right now. So let's talk the draft, not the expansion draft, the actual entry draft. To highlight their first few picks, Cody Glass at 6, Nick Suzuki at 13th, and Eric Brandstrom at 15th, followed by Nicholas Hague at 34th. One of the stronger draft classes for them as far as teams go. Overall, the draft wasn't extremely deep or expected to be very, very good, but the 4 picks they did get early on kind of jump starts their farm system, and I think that was necessary. Now, the interesting part about what they did as far as the expansion, like taking on David Clarkson's contract and things like that, they have a first, second, fourth, 2 fifths, and a sixth in 2018. But in 2019 is where it gets really interesting. They have their first, and then 3 seconds and 3 thirds, as they have 7 picks in the first 3 rounds. And I think that is where they're going to do their damage, because these next upcoming draft classes are supposed to be a little bit stronger than the one that just happened. For their cap, they've got $66 million in cap space used and about $8.6 million free. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, is that when you look at their cap hits and who they have signed, these are their only players signed past next year. So I'm talking like after the season, these are the players that are still signed to a contract. You have Fleury, Bellemare, Lindberg, Eric Holla, Cody Eakin, Shipachyov, and then they have David Clarkson and Riley Smith both signed. And again, the Clarkson contract's buried for another 3 years because I don't think he'll ever play again. And then Riley Smith for another $5 million for the next 5 years. So those are the only players that are signed. So what that means is what McPhee gets to do is trade all of his guys, which he should, at the trade deadline this year. Marchessault is still young, but in my hot takes, I'm going to give my thoughts on him. But Neal 100% needs to be traded at this year's deadline. Perron, same thing, needs to be gone. If they can, I think they should keep McNabb and Theodore, obviously, but Garrison, Spiza, Schmidt, all of them should go. And my reason for that is this team is not going to win at all. And if you look at who they have on their roster, none of them are foundational guys, other than the draft picks they have. But even Cody Glass doesn't look like he's going to be, he's not a Matthews or McDavid, but he is a little bit of a building block. But they don't have any, foundational guys, and that's what they need to find. And the only way they're going to do that is in the draft. So you need to move all of those guys for more picks next year, and I think that that's what's going to happen, which does make Vegas very interesting to watch. So, here are my hot takes for the Vegas Golden Knights. They will finish 8th in the division by quite a bit. Neil, Perron, both traded. I don't think that Marchessault will hit 20 goals after his 30-goal campaign. He's going to get first-line minutes again in Vegas, but I think that he will not hit 20. And I don't think that any of the picks that have been drafted in this year will play this year. I think that some of them will get the 9-game look because they have no other options and they might give them a taste, but none of them will stick in the NHL. And now on to the Sharks, who I've followed for the last 15 years of my life as a diehard. So I do have a little bit more insight when it comes to the Sharks. So to go over last year, they finished 3rd in the Pacific Division with 99 points and 11th overall in the league. Now the Sharks were actually cruising to the Pacific Division title, but they absolutely fell apart in March and April. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they went on a long playoff run the year before till June. And then in September, half the roster went to the World Championships, followed up by the asinine new schedule where they get 3 games every week and then a bye week, which just forces more games in. And you have an older Sharks team, and I think it just kind of caught up with them. So as far as stats go, they finished 8th in the league in Corsi, which is, fantastic, but given their talent level, that's kind of to be expected. Goals for is 19th. I'm going to go over why this is extremely concerning coming up in a little bit, but that's a giant drop-off from the electric Shark roster and performances that they put on in the years past. Goals against is 5th, which I think is transitioned to what the new Sharks are. And then on the power play, 25th in the league, and penalty kill 18th. DeBoer needs to figure out what to do on the penalty kill and power play, and I think that someone special on the Sharks being moved kind of forces that because the power play stayed the exact same for the entire year, and obviously that didn't work out. So let's discuss acquisitions. They signed Brandon Bollig because I don't fucking know. Doug Wilson needs to have a fighter on the team, and it's getting completely old. They re-signed Thornton for $8 million for 1 year, and they did sign Vlasic and Jones to an extension. Vlasic getting $7 million for eight years. $7 million for the best defensive defenseman in the NHL is fine. The 8-year part is just because there's no way you're going to lose him. And then Jones looking like he's on the bottom end, or the top end of average goalies, right outside the top 10 would be where I would put him. Who they lost, Michael Haley, thank Christ, because Peter DeBoer loved him for some reason, and there's just too many young NHL or AHLers that need to be playing over Michael Haley. And then my boy, my favorite NHL player outside of Jerome McGinley, my favorite Shark ever since I began watching them back in 2003, Patrick Marleau is now a Toronto Maple Leaf. And you know what? I am surprised and not surprised at the same time. The money he got is crazy, and I'm glad the Sharks didn't have to pay him that. But it is extremely sad to see someone go, especially when he is Mr. Shark. Now let's talk draft. Doug Wilson, again, reaching in the first round. What else is new for Josh Norris, getting him at 19th overall? He had the best combine, but if you are a fan of the NFL, that means absolutely nothing. It does look like a reach. Almost every single NHL expert had him outside the first round, and I would have loved to have either Eli Tolvanen or Klim Kostin taken there instead, just because the Sharks lack upside game-breaking potential in the minors, and they don't need another third-line center, which looks like what Josh Norris will be. What they did get, though, again, Doug Wilson may be awful in the early rounds, but in the later rounds, he's a genius, just like a Joe Pavelski. But Sasha Chemlevski and Ivan Sheshkovich in the 6th round. Apparently, that is one of the 2 of the best steals in the NHL draft, and it'll be interesting to watch them grow. As far as the cap goes, everyone seems to be crying about the extensions and whatnot, especially because Burns already makes $8 million for the next decade. 64.8 million in cap used, a little over 10 million left, and they still have to sign Chris Tierney. lots of space available. Again, when you lose Marleau, Obviously, that opens up a ton of space. In 2018, they're going to lose Thornton, Ward, and Yannick Hansen. My feeling is, depending on how this year goes, I would suspect Yannick Hansen gets an extension. He's only making $2 million now. He'll probably make about $4 next for on his next contract. Thornton, I have no idea. It wouldn't surprise me if he's traded at the deadline if the Sharks aren't in a playoff position. It wouldn't surprise me if he signed for another 2 years. I have no idea how that's going to go, and it would be really sad to see him go as well as Marleau. Now, next year, they also have Thomas Hertl. They're going to need to re-sign. This is a giant year for Thomas Hertl because he's going to more than likely play third-line center, which is the smart way to play them. The Sharks have extreme depth down the wing, very weak on depth down the center, but very weak on the wings. Hertl's contract might take a hit because he might play third-line center, which obviously will not allow him to put up massive points. But I think this is a big career year for him, and it'll be interesting to watch him. How the lineup looks right now, it's a little gross because of the loss of Marleau, but the first line looking like Timo Meier, Thornton, and Pavelski. That's still a great first line, followed by Yannick Hansen, Couture, and Donskoy. This is going to change a ton, by the way, this second line. I have no idea how that's going to shake out. Couture is obviously locked in as a second line center, but I have no idea what they're going to do on the wings. Followed up by Carlson, Hertl, and LeBanc. That's a good third line, and it has a lot of talent on it, and I think that might be half decent. And then they have Bodker, Tierney, and Ward on the fourth line. That'll be interesting. I think Bodker and Ward will slide into the second and first lines. Bodker needs to rebound. That's just bottom line. Their defense, they still have one of the best defensive cores in the NHL. Martin and Burns on the first pairing, followed up by Vlasic and Braun. One of the best top fours in the NHL, followed up by Brandon Dillon, and Dylan DeMello is finally going to get his chance. And then with Jones and Dell and net, they're pretty rock solid on the back end. It's where it's up front that they're going to struggle again. And, I think that's going to lead to a lot of different trades or signings. And, I think it's going to be another boring season. It's not going to be the high offensive Sharks that have been in years past. I think it's going to be more of last year. All right, guys, my steaming hot takes for the San Jose Sharks. I think that Peter DeBoer will be fired by Christmas. I think that they will get off to a sluggish start. The power play and penalty kill are a disaster, and I think that Wilson is in a position where he needs to make the playoffs to keep his job, and Peter DeBoer will be gone. I think Thornton will rebound and put up 60 points. He only has a one-year deal, but Thornton is still one of the best at making plays, and I think that he is going to come out and prove that again. I think Timo Meier will kind of bust out of his kind of slump in his rookie season and put up 45 points. He had one of the craziest amounts of shots generated, but a 3.5% shooting percentage. That's going to change. I think that Burns will post under 60 points. The team kind of revolves around Burns, but that's under the DeBoer system. They rely on everything to go through Burns, and I think that that's going to change. Or at least be a little bit more reduced. I think they will finish fourth in the division and in the second wild card to make the playoffs. Now, a bonus hot take. Because Doug Wilson has a giant set on him, what I think is going to happen, in my honest opinion, Thornton only signing a one-year deal and leaving that $8 million being gone next year, I think that Doug Wilson will take a giant run at John Tavares from the Islanders if he does not get extended by the Islanders. I think that he will throw $12 million for 7 years at him, and I think that he will try super aggressively to sign John Tavares to replace the first line center role. So guys, that is my preview for the Pacific Division Part 2. Let me know in the comments section below what you think. And thank you for all the subscriptions and whatnot. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at NoSleevesGaming, as well as on Twitch, www.twitch.tv/NoSleeves12. I stream every Sunday, and all of my league gaming games as well. So again, just let me know what you think. Now, all the new coverage for the beta and whatnot, I will be having videos all throughout the beta for NHL 18, as well as any new updates. I'm going to discuss the new rookie cards for coming into next year because they did release a lot of updates on that just now. So look for that video next Sunday. All right, guys, so stay average. Everybody know our name, and if your dad is gone, but your mom